for carte blanche authority. I think this is extremely important. DWR and Reclamation have worked very closely with state and federal fish agencies last year, this year. We've had daily phone calls between the leadership of my agency, Reclamation, the two federal fish agencies, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife over the last month to make daily decisions on project operations that seek to balance providing reasonable protection to fish and maintaining reasonable amounts of exports. I think all of my fellow directors and regional directors from those agencies will acknowledge that this has been extremely useful and highly successful in managing the limited amounts of water that we have in play this year. We want to extend that same sort of working relationship to the state board. So while we look for this approval of this provision of the temporary urgency change petition, we understand that we will continue to need to work with the fish agencies, with the state board itself, in managing day-to-day decisions based upon real-time information. In fact, as I think our technical panel will get into, in order for us to exercise this authority we seek on this tiered level of exports, we'll likely need approval from fish agencies on old and middle river flow relaxations or considerations. So all of these regulations, of course, work very closely together. But I think this is extremely important to note that what we're asking for is the ability to work with you all in managing the system moving forward, not a free pass to exercise some given authority. So let me just close with a couple of other thoughts. You all have a difficult, if not impossible, job to do here, as many of us in the water sector have in this fourth year of drought. A couple of what I consider to be very important points. D1641 provides regulation regarding different year types, as Tom explained earlier, including regulations that apply to critically dry years. This isn't just a critically dry year. This is the fourth year of what appears to be exceptional drought in California in a sequence of dry years. And I think this may be a crucial issue that we either are miscommunicating on or have a fundamental misunderstanding. I believe that the D1641 standards in place for critically dry years should be an important reference point, but not a decree on how we operate in the fourth year of exceptional drought. The required findings of the TUCP, including the finding that no unreasonable effect on fish, wildlife, or other upstream, in-stream beneficial uses, should be considered in the light of current conditions, meaning the fourth year of exceptional drought. I hope we can have more discussion about that standard, because I think it really is the crux of the matter that the board must consider today and moving forward. Finally, I've also heard concerns that this particular aspect of our TUCP request was not included in our drought contingency plan or adequately communicated to board staff prior to appearing in our petition that we submitted to the board. And I regret that anyone was surprised by this request. I attribute it primarily to the fact that our staffs are all working extraordinarily hard under these severe conditions. We had a January that was supposed to be our wettest month of the year and turned out to be historically dry, so conditions changed beneath our feet between the time we prepared and submitted the drought contingency plan and the time that we submitted our first TUCP to the board. Nonetheless, I think we can all continue to improve the way that we engage, that we communicate both internally and externally, and how we make these decisions on the behalf of the state of California. I'm extremely proud of the way all of our agencies have responded to drought on California's behalf. I think it's hard to tell stories of success when people are suffering, when the ecology is suffering, as it so clearly is happening across the state. But I think we are doing a good job in managing difficult decisions based on the information that we can scrounge up and get before us to help inform those decisions. As I say, I think we have a very good story to tell on how we've worked with fish agencies. The project agencies have worked with the fish agencies in the last couple of months to balance the situation. I want to bring the state board into that fold and improve the way that we work with you, and we all work to help manage this difficult situation for California. So thank you all. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Very well said.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairwoman Marcus and members of the board.
Make sure you're... The toughest thing about a state board proceeding is talking into those microphones. I just want you
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, it's hard.
I'm not here as a matter of stature. I'm here as a reflection of how closely linked we've been with Department of Water Resources and, frankly, all the agencies here.
Remember how nervous that made people when you sat there with the fish agencies, one of our hearings last year?
I do.
It's be careful what you wish for, I think.
That's right. On behalf of Reclamation, we certainly appreciate the role that the board has in balancing the broad public interest, and I would just echo the fact that the coordination we've had with all the agencies is key to the progress we've made. We certainly appreciate what Tom Howard and the board has considered and approved, but I'd like to just focus on some of the key concerns from a CVP standpoint. We'll hear a lot more from John Lehigh and Ron Milligan, but I would venture to say that the CVP is in certainly no better shape than last year, if not a little worse. We have, as far as allocations for our project supplies, this week we've put our senior water rights holders on notice that we fully acknowledge our obligation to them in their contracts in a short year that we're in, but it's much like 2014. It's going to take an awful lot of cooperation from those senior water rights holders to make that work, and that also is obviously critical to transfers. I would echo what Mark said in maybe a little different way. What Reclamation and DWR submitted to the Executive Director on the 23rd of January, we believe was protective of those most affected by the drought under the circumstances. I saw the characterization of the volumes that might equate to, focusing on the middle tier of pumping in March, and we've not looked at the specific number. It looks reasonable, but I can assure you that every acre foot consistent with mitigating impacts to other beneficial users, every acre foot we can get south of the Delta, given the agricultural impacts, the water supply impacts to municipal and industrial customers, and also our refuge users as well, is just absolutely critical. And in the context of this drought, 80,000 acre feet looked like an awful lot of water. So I would just echo that. The same coordination is how we've worked with DWR, the fish agencies, during December and February, when we've worked with National Marine Fisheries and the board and Fish and Wildlife Service and the state to seek out flexibility to move additional water. And every little bit of optimism we had in December and February has been negated by vast periods of really weather like we're having today. Again, we understand the broad purpose of the board and appreciate the opportunity here. There's going to be a lot of very telling presentations and panels, and I think your use of time is prudent. A couple CVP specifics. First, I was glad to hear Tom Howard's comments about the transfers. We would very much hope that by the time we get to the transfer season that we can operate as we did last year. And there were certainly some concerns about the characterization in Tom Howard's order, again acknowledging that in January, February, transfers aren't an issue, but I appreciate that needs to be front and center.
What is the season, March through something? What is the
It's
transfer
actually
season?
June, July,
Oh,
September.
that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
we extended it last year.
But the transfers are being entered into now.
Right.
That's right, although with our this week's announcements to our senior water rights holders and next week's initial water supply allocations, that's going to provide the initial clarity on what the transfer market looks like. But I will say we shared some concern and appreciate that that'll need to be a continued focus. As it relates to kind of CVP-centric issues, obviously we're very focused on using every drop released out of Shasta to meet beneficial purposes. It's critical to temperature management. Frankly, temperature management is going to be a concern under almost all situations, and we're going to have to be very closely coordinating with all the agencies and the state board as we work through temperature management. And again, acknowledging that last year our cooperation with our senior water rights holders on the Sacramento was really critical to the performance we achieved, albeit I'm not sure there was any way to avoid some significant temperature impacts. Also, the San Joaquin system, both as you look at New Melones and Millerton, just to focus on a couple specifics, there's no question that come April, May, June, and July, we're going to have to be very closely coordinating with the board and the fish agencies on both 1641 and biological opinion requirements, because just how dire storage and inflow is to date on those particular systems. And I guess I would close with the fact that we appreciate the board's acknowledgement that we need to move quickly, and there's some concern that this process kind of plays out and prohibits the projects from moving as quickly as we need to. I think that we've seen that the board has the ability to do things that allow us to continue on really a real-time basis. But as we get further into the spring, I think further discussions with the state board on those San Joaquin standards, and certainly barriers and temperature management on Sac River, and possibly transfers, need to be a focus of other discussions that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you, I just have a quick question, and we can talk about this later in the day as well, but I'm trying to remember in your drought contingency plan, given what happened on temperature on the Sacramento, I mean, are you planning to keep more water in Shasta, or is that part of what you've asked for a conversation on, Tom? I sort of felt like you were acknowledging there is more there, but there's a need for more there.
I guess as our allocations line up and as we get additional forecasts, we still haven't come to a firm point on what that operation is going to look like.
All right.
But there's
it's got to
no
look better than last year.
I'm not sure about that. I think Ron might shed some light on that, but I'm not comfortable with the characterization that necessarily looks better than last year.
Right.
But I think Ron may have more to offer there.
Other questions?
Well, I have some questions, but you may want to defer them to John and Ron. Up to you. But I'm looking for a way to hone in on the benefits. So the chart that Tom had up that showed the range of between 69 and 84,000 acre feet. I'm trying to get a better sense of what that means. The order specifies that there's no way to really know the trade-off because the allocation decisions weren't out. There's a lot of information in there about fish impacts, but not much at all on water supply impacts. And so I'm looking to get some additional information about what that would mean to export that amount of water. What would it mean to the ability to transfer water? What sort of a difference would it make? I know that when you have a zero water supply, it's hard to transfer any water because you don't have a water supply. So what would it mean for those areas that are projected to be at zero? What would it mean for the refuges? I know this is not your area of expertise with respect to CVP and SWP contracts, but what about groundwater impacts? What would it mean on ground and drinking water? And then, of course, we do have some letters on this, so I think that we'll probably get some comments on it. But for those urban areas, I know in many urban areas there's a diversity of supply, but there are some areas that really don't have diversity of supplies, and they're almost entirely reliant upon, in particular, state water project deliveries.
Yeah, I think Ron will cover that a little more in a little more detail. I think suffice to say that any water we can export is going to just allow us to better meet our senior obligations to the exchange contractors, allow us to meet our obligations to our statutory obligations to refuge supplies, which just gets us significantly closer to the ability to provide additional water for agricultural exporters south of the Delta. I will also agree that there's a fair amount of unknown. The east side of the San Joaquin Valley, there's been obviously a long history of sustainable water supply there, and the fact that project supplies were not available last year, we are hearing has had a significant impact on communities in that area's ability to access other water sources. And you know, we took our best shot of what that impact looked like in January, but I think that's going to have to play out. But just wanted to bring that up, that we're hearing that's a significant concern.
I don't have a lot to add to that other than to say that I never thought I'd know so much about project operations as I do today, thanks to the last couple of years of very deliberate conversation and engagement. Just to, again, try to provide some perspective, a 15% allocation for the State Water Project means that we will be delivering something on the order of 600,000 acre-feet of water. Another 80,000, if that's what the number turns out to be, shared between the State Water Project, between the CVP, for their purposes, including refuges. That just gives you some sense of what this means. It's like I said in my opening comments, this isn't going to fundamentally change the magnitude of the effects of drought, but it's not insubstantial either.
Is there any previously stored water that will be made available, or that could possibly be available, or are you including transfer water in your calculation of 600,000 acre feet?
No, the 600,000 acre feet is purely the State Water Project allocation delivery based upon 15%. So any delivered transfer water would be above and beyond that.
Right.
As I also spoke to in my opening comments, any stored water from previous years is long gone, so that's not an option for State Water Project contractors this year.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you
very much, and appreciate you being here, and know that your teams are going to be here for the duration for questions as well. I am going to suggest really a 5-minute break just for facilities and water, coffee if you need it. So we'll come back in 5 minutes, 11:05.
green light to be on. Oh, so look.
Test one. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Yeah. This is audio on though. Yeah, sorry. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah. I just needed. Test 1 2. Yeah. Because they're not hearing them. All right, you can turn.
You're just going to have to allow me to never turn and speak to you.
Can we get the audio on? bottom one, if you hit projector, it's a big button in the...
Oh, good. Oh, yeah, that's great.
Should be on.
All right. No, that doesn't sound very loud.
All right, let's go back to this one, and let's just see if I can... Sorry, it was just working a second ago. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the microphone like that, and then that should help. That's what I think is really going to be the solution.
higher or lower?
Lower, just a little bit. There we go.
All right. We'll be reconvening shortly, so please take your seats.
Okay, I got you gained all the way up.
All right. Good. All right. Let's come back, please. Please. We'll be reconvening now. We will end up taking our lunch break somewhere around 12:30. All right. Before we have the technical presentation or the elected, we have a panel of folks coming up that were organized by Congressman Costa's office. We do have another elected official who's been with us for a while, and I appreciate her listening, and that's Supervisor Mary Nedjedli Pifo from Contra Costa County. There you are. I saw you walk in a while ago. Thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you for your indulgence.
No, delighted to have you.
And honorable members of the board. My name is Mary Nedjedli Pifo. I am a county supervisor in Contra Costa County. I also serve as chair of the Delta Protection Commission and as a council member on the Delta Stewardship Council. But to be clear, I am here right now to speak on behalf of Contra Costa County. I am here to support the state board's effort to protect emergency water supplies for fish, people, and the economic and environmental values of the San Francisco Bay and our fragile delta. As we work to balance the needs of the state with the delta's limited resources under severe drought conditions, freshwater flows are essential to a healthy San Francisco Bay Delta estuary. Fresh water that flows through the delta to the bay is not wasted. It is a vital element of the Bay Area, our economy, from our tidal wetlands to our flood protection efforts to the ecosystem that supports Dungeness crab, salmon fisheries, migrating birds, and many other important and vital species. Adequate outflows are critical to maintaining water quality for our farmers, our cities, industrial users within the 5 Delta counties, as well as for the health of the San Francisco Bay. Contra Costa County's entire northern waterfront is bounded with water that flows from the delta to the bay. Our northern waterfront area alone generates 21.6 billion in annual economic output and is home to an estimated 60% of the industrial designated land within Contra Costa County. There are more than 26,000 jobs tied to the northern waterfront alone. These jobs are performed by people. I urge the State Board to adhere to the minimum delta outflow standards in Decision 1641, which are already weaker when there is less water in the system, including during drought conditions. If delta outflow standards must be weakened during the drought, they must be weakened only for the protection of emergency water supplies for people, fish, and wildlife. Increased pumping at this time could substantially reduce delta outflow and have devastating effects on the Bay Delta estuary and all of us who depend on its health. Chair Marcus, you hit the nail on the head about the importance of maintaining the X2 salinity barrier near Antioch. I urge you to stay the course. The board should not weaken the executive director's order on the temporary urgency change petition, the TUCP. Delta water quality is not what it should be today, and any further reductions in water quality will only have a further negative effect. Most importantly, the conflict over this decision highlights how we have painted ourselves into a corner by mismanaging Delta freshwater outflows, driving our Bay Delta estuary to the brink of collapse, and by failing to adequately plan for a multi-year drought. I am hopeful that the passage of Proposition 1 stages our future differently in this regard, but those resources will take time to develop. Today, we must manage our freshwater flows better to build the resiliency for both people and the environment to survive these drought conditions. People and fish deserve equal protections. Currently, the Delta is managed for maximum extraction, which reduces our collective resiliency. Our future as a region and as a state depends on our strength and ability to right these wrongs. And finally, as you know, communities in the Delta are united by distrust of the proposed Delta tunnels as part of the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, the BDCP. We are repeatedly told by the state to trust us, we'll follow the rules. Waiving environmental rules today that we depend on to protect our interests in order to increase water exports at the expense of fish and wildlife, the people of the Bay Area, and other beneficial uses in the Delta only furthers the distrust that any new facility would be operated according to the rules. Changing the rules in the middle of the game is not fair, nor is it reasonable. I thank you for your good work, and I ask you for your consideration of these important issues. And again, thank you for your indulgence of time, Chair Marcus.
Thank you so much for joining us and for all your service in all those ways.
And to all of you, thank you.
Thank you. Great. This panel, if I have this correctly, is Maria Gutierrez, Andy Souza, Jose Antonio Ramirez, Rick Ortega, and maybe somebody else. It actually says East Side Rep invited TBD. I wasn't just making that up. And you've requested 30 minutes. Yeah, make sure it's on and pull it close to you so that it's, I mean, I have to have this clipped to me because I just can't do it.
Is that
That's
working?
Great.
Great.
Yeah, it's really
this
hard
little
to do.
green light that says push probably should have tipped me off. Madam Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Andy Souza. I am the CEO and president of the Community Food Bank. We are the food bank that serves the 5 counties of Fresno, Madera, Kings, Tulare, and Kern counties through the heart of the San Joaquin Valley. As you probably know, food banks are in the business of traditionally supplemental food assistance and emergency food assistance. And we think of food assistance being in the neighborhood of 2 to 4 days worth of food, help families get through tough times at the end of the month. We've all heard the cliche of running out of money before you run out of month, and that's normally what we serve. But unfortunately, since May of this year, we have been the drought relief coordinator for Fresno County alone. It's by county individual food banks. We are serving Fresno County. Since May of this year, we have distributed 90,000 meal boxes. That's a number that's matched by Tulare and Kern counties as well. I'm sorry, okay, thank you. To put that in context, we normally serve in the 5 communities that we're serving for drought relief, we normally serve 500 to 600 families, again, supplemental food assistance. That's 2 to 5 meals a month. Right now, we're serving anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 families. That's anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 people a month. And we're providing full sustenance for those families, 22 to 26 days worth of food every month. When you spoke earlier this morning, Senator Vidak mentioned the human suffering aspect of what we're dealing with. And we see that firsthand. We see that in families that are standing in line, and you literally have seen the regression since May. You know, May, there was still a sense of hope. There's some change. Things might be happening. As this has drug on these 10 months now, there's a sense of helplessness and a sense of hopelessness that we see in the families we serve. I mean, we provide physical sustenance, but it's the wraparound. It's the impact on the families. It's the impact on the schools. It's the impact on the very day-to-day life that we're seeing families hit the hardest. So in a previous life, I served in local government, and we used to always talk about stats and figures, and we would refer to the misery index. Unfortunately, in my line of work now, the misery index is very real.
And these are families, and these are children, and many of whom you see out here as we speak. We're serving families that a year ago would have never dreamed of being in a food line. These are families that are working people. These are families that, when we have a chance to meet with them, the comments are pretty consistent, and that is, we're very grateful for your assistance. We're so thankful that you're here, but we just want to work. We don't want to have to rely on the federal government, we don't have to rely on the state government, and we don't want to have to rely on you. We just want to take care of our families. And so from the day-to-day impact, it's very real, obviously not only Fresno County, but for all 5 counties we serve. And we just hope any assistance that can come that way would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak for you. My name is Maria Lourdes Gutierrez. I am a volunteer with El Agua es Asunto de Todos, which means water is everybody's business. The 2 main goals of the campaign is to bring awareness of the water issue among Latinos in California, and also to give them a platform of expression to deal with the water issue. California is now entering the 4th year of drought, as we all know. The drought, like any drought, has wreaked complete havoc in our community, the lives of Latinos' families and the communities they live in. And when you impact the Latino community, you're not looking at a domino effect with epic proportions, because it affects restaurants, gas stations, truck drivers, gardeners, mom and pop stores, small businesses, schools, and food projects. Our situation is grim. As Andy mentioned, we've seen unemployment in some of our areas over 40%. We're living in America, and we have to ask ourselves, why? It's going to get worse. What can we do? Well, we need your help. The unconscionable decision by Executive Director Tom Howard to deny additional pumping and water supply to our Central Valley community is outrageous and immoral. His decision is a slap in the face to the Latinos who live south of the Delta. Let me tell you something about the Latino community. Latinos want to work. They don't want a handout. They don't want to be standing in food lines. People tell us every place we go and stop in dialogue, they say, I'm losing my car, I'm losing my job, I'm losing my house. My family's dream of a college education for my kid is disappearing. They tell us, all I want to do is work. We're seeing more women and men standing in food lines, people who are being forced to make tough decisions. A lady recently said, I have to put food on my table or buy my medication. We are seeing too many families lacking the basic necessities of water for drinking, cooking, showering because their wells have run dry. Another year with 0% water will be even more harmful to these families. I've met farmers who have told me if they don't get water, they would have to lay off entire families of workers who have worked for them for generations. Farmers of all races and all nationalities. Most who have started as farm workers that bought the acreage and now they're farmers. They're part of what makes this nation great. People are very angry in my community, Latino community. You need to understand the total impact of a bad decision will have on our communities. We need water now. We believe water is a civil right. It's a human right. All of our communities request that the State Water Resource Control Board approve in full and allow the state and federal agencies to collectively manage the Central Valley Project and the state water on a real-time basis. Our community cannot afford any lesser operation flexibility during this unprecedented crisis. I would hope that the number of people who are here present today and the many thousand who couldn't make the trip today, that you would realize that your actions don't just affect one industry. It affects the heart and soul of our community, economic energy of the Central Valley. We need water today. We need water to keep our communities vibrant and our hopes and our dreams alive. We're literally drying up, and we will blow away like the dust. Without water, Latinos will have no jobs, no economy, and create a domino effect that will devastate all of California. The Latino community can no longer stand and be marginalized by the water debate. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope, Tom, you really reconsider your decision.
Thank you.
Salutations, Honorable State Board. My name is Jose Antonio Ramirez. I am a native of the Central San Joaquin Valley, and I've spent over 20 years engaged in one form or another as it relates to water resource management, and about 14 years working as a city manager of many of the communities that Andy has so graciously served. So thank you, Andy. I can tell you that I have experienced firsthand the many hardships that farm workers, farmers, small businesses, schools, and other just normal residents in the community. And I can tell you that I've also organized food drives, marches, fundraisers due to the great need. I have also seen parochial schools close down. I've seen the dwindling of funding coming in to the schools because many have moved out either of the community or to another state. And I've also seen them lose their jobs and lose their homes firsthand, being able to talk to them one-on-one. Gazing into their very eyes of so many farm workers and their children while they stand in line for a dispensary is very heart-wrenching, especially because, especially for me, I know they feel very embarrassed. And I said, don't be embarrassed. We all go through, a little hardship here and there in life. So stand there, hold your head up high, and we're going to get through this. We just need to, again, work together and come together as a community. And that's one of the things that we're doing here is coming together here as a community to share the real, true hardships that, everybody has said and has been emphasized by Maria and Andy. The underprivileged but big heart individuals that are all, several of them are here behind me, as Andy and Maria had alluded to, that's what they communicate to me as well. You know what? They don't really want any handouts. What they want is a job, and jobs are connected to water. Water is economic development. And I would like to just emphasize in Spanish to the group in the back que lo que queremos nosotros es básicamente un trabajo. Y sin trabajo, si no hay agua, no hay trabajo. Y si no hay trabajo, nos vamos a tener que poner en línea para comida. Y no queremos eso. Nosotros queremos trabajo. I have also experienced the hardships that communities and their residents face due to the drought. We all know that the cost and time frame to dig a deeper well and or a small sand filtration system cost thousands and thousands of dollars. It was mentioned here today. We have to go deeper or we have to, buy filtration system. One way or another, that has to be paid for. So then we turn around and we have to charge that to our residents. And so therefore, if the majority of their money that they don't have much of has to go towards paying, their utilities, definitely there's a direct impact to their quality of life. And so that's very important, and I wanted to highlight that. This, of course, directly contributes to the decline of the quality of life, as I mentioned. The cost of potable water goes up, and economic development also suffers because if your infrastructure and you have problems with water issues, it doesn't matter at what scale, there's not going to be people that are going to want to invest into your community. Please, Mr. Howard, reconsider the temporary urgency change petition that would allow the various corresponding agencies the opportunity to increase pumping during these specific periods of time that were outlined. I believe that we can balance the needs of people with that of the environment, but we need to have that requested flexibility. Again, please reconsider the February 3rd, 2015 denial and provide the hardworking people an opportunity to have hope and the tools to try and rebuild. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. See, you're accompanied by music of the angels when you start speaking.
Thank you for having me, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Rick Ortega. I'm the General Manager of the Grassland Water District and Resource Conservation District. I represent over 2,000 landowners which maintain 2/3 of the South of Delta refuge habitat under CVPIA. The grasslands in Merced County, which also includes the state and federal refuges, represent the last remaining contiguous block of wetlands in the western United States. The ecological area is over 300 square miles, so as a point of reference, it's about the size of Manhattan. Annually, the grassland resource managers are tasked with providing habitat for millions of migratory waterfowl and water birds, and also additional listed species such as the giant garter snake. Out at our Volta wildlife area, we know of the last remaining reproductive population of giant garter snake that's critically dependent on summer water and irrigation. We are also a vital component to the health of the aquifer, and I think that's a point that should be driven home. In a normal condition, we're delivering hundreds of thousands of acre feet to the landscape, and we're impounding that for 9 months. at a time. All of the communities in Merced County, except for the city of Dos Palos, which now is connected to the aqueduct, are all completely dependent on their groundwater supply. So there are definitely indirect implications to shortages in our water supply. Grasslands Water District, Ducks Unlimited, and the California Waterfowl Association submitted a comment letter outlining some objections to underscore the physical and financial impacts south of Delta wildlife refuges are experiencing this past year and are likely to experience this year from denying intermediate exports. Rather than read excerpts from my letter, I would just like to simply focus on the hardship the south of Delta refuges have endured over the past 14 months. Which undoubtedly have, south of Delta pumping constraints have exacerbated. As a result of less than a 50% water allocation or water supply allocation, when you consider both our level 2 and our incremental level 4, basically we were out of water by the end of December last year, or 2013, and could no longer maintain the seasonal wetland habitat that we typically maintain into May. This, coupled with the inability to provide irrigations to the moist soil beneficial species, resulted in an overall metabolic deficit for the migratory species.
That meant they didn't have enough food.
They did not have enough
Just
food
helping
to make their migration route to reproduce and to carry on. So there are definitely some carryover effects that are implicated. We are also unable to provide summer deliveries to provide adequate brood habitat for our local breeding birds. Shorebirds and giant garter snake. Our conveyance was dry, and the condition was nothing short of dire for those species dependent on freshwater supplies. We host over 252 species of bird alone, and we see somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 million birds move through us annually. Typically, the wetland complex would be flooding in August. Last year, we weren't able to flood until well into October, with only half of the critical habitat flooded by December. So here we are again, being faced with the inability to adequately grow enough food to meet these requirements, provide habitat for our local breeding birds and listed species. We know consecutive years without irrigation on these moist soil habitats basically causes the food base to plummet, which will undoubtedly result in poor body conditions, lower reproductive success, and disease. The last point I'd like to reemphasize is that the communities of Merced County, especially Los Banos, Gastine, Newman, are completely dependent by the health of and the reliability of the refuge water supply. When our supply is cut in half from hundreds of thousands of acre feet, it directly impacts the water quality and the viability of those domestic wells and in the rural areas as well. Small adjustments and flexibility in the operations, such as the request for intermediate exports, could make a significant difference, not only for the refuges, but for those rural and communities in Merced County. Please reconsider your agency's denial of the proposed intermediate export pumping level, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Sure.
So when you talk about impacts to these communities because of the interconnection between refuge water supply and groundwater recharge, you're talking just about the Grasslands area or the entire San Luis refuge complex?
So the entirety of the ecological area, which would include the state and federal refuges in addition to the private wetlands of the Resource Conservation District. So yeah, the broader footprint. We all hold a similar contract with Reclamation for our level 2 supplies, so when the allocation comes out, it's sort of across the board. Kern National Wildlife Refuge down in Tulare County or Kern County is much dire situation where only 1/3 of their supply is level 2 and 2/3 of their supply is actually incremental level 4. So that's probably the poster child for drought.
Kern, and then what community, if any, depend on refuge water supply for groundwater recharge in that area?
There's some rural communities. It's such a small footprint. I doubt that there's a direct connectivity to the shallow perch table there.
Okay, and then you said Los Banos. What other communities?
Gastine, Newman, Volta. definitely.
I would add that, for instance, several of the communities in Merced County depend 100% on groundwater. And so there's a direct correlation on other competing interests. And so that directly impacts, basically groundwater level. And we've experienced in this Livingston area about a 40-foot